Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman. I hope you guys had an amazing weekend, just like I did. I actually had a nice cup of Vertical Momentum coffee and sat down and read this amazing book. It's called Look to the Warriors, 12 Perspectives to Cultivate Inner Peace by my friend Lee. He's an amazing gentleman. He's done some amazing things in uniform, even better things out of uniform. Lee, welcome to the show, brother. Thank you so much for being able to hang out with us today.
No, really, thanks to you. I appreciate it. I'm just happy to be here. I've watched some of the shows, and I'm the one that's humbled. Really, thank you for taking the time to read the book and want to have me on, man.
Bro, this book is a game changer. Changed my perspectives on life, like we talked about earlier. Everything is about perspective. My dad came over on the boat over from Italy, and one of his favorite sayings is, "The man with no shoes can't complain to the man with no feet." So
Wow.
It's all about perspective in life. So first of all, before I forget, because I have a traumatic brain injury, and if I don't ask the question, I'll forget it. What is your definition of resiliency?
Wow, big question, huh? I think my definition of resiliency always goes to the inner game, right? There's physical resilience. I mean, there's so many ways to approach it, but for me, the definition of resiliency is whatever that means for you, the ability to find that center, find that balance, find that inner strength that can sustain you. I don't want to say all the time, right? But through life's challenges, it's that inner peace, I guess, or that inner emotional resilience and strength that you can take with you. It's portable, right? And you can take it with you through the moments of your life.
Okay, so let's hop back in the Wayback Machine. Tell
Yeah,
us a little bit about where you come from, where you grew up, and how a little bit about your military service and about how you became the man that you are today.
absolutely. Thank you. So let's see. Born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. It was a super cool place to grow up. Really
And you
cool
guys
place.
just, by the way, you guys just picked up an amazing quarterback. Derek Carr just signed with the Saints today.
Whoo, yeah. It's
Who that?
it,
Who that nation?
That's right. Who dat? It was a really special, cool place to grow up. Being a teenager there was wild. But yeah, so grew up in New Orleans. You said your grandpa came over on the boat. Same, man. My grandfather on my mother's side came over from Spain, from Madrid in like the 30s, 20s, on a boat, and took him a couple of years to save up, bring grandma over, and they proceeded to have 12 kids. And my mom was one of them. So big Spanish Catholic family in New Orleans. And then my dad, so that's my mom's name was Dominguez. That's that Spanish side. And the Kelley is the Irish side. My dad's side had been in New Orleans for a while. So, grew up just pretty standard, pretty just, lower middle class type of suburban life. We didn't have much, but I wasn't wanting for anything. It's funny, as I get older, when I was younger, I used to be like, oh man, my dad was, and he had some issues. He was an alcoholic, and, there were some issues. But I find as I get older, I'm not saying I'm old, but, as I move through time, my narrative has kind of changed, and I see him differently now. And by the way, they're both gone now. Lost my dad a couple years ago, lost mom about 17 years ago. And my narrative.
Before we get any further, let me ask you a question, because I grew up, my mother was an addict. Thank God she's clean now.
Wow.
But for me, the way I dealt with it, my solace was reading. My solace was books. That's how I dealt with it. How did you deal with it as a child at a young age?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think same. I've always been a book lover, reader. I think I escaped into some of that. And then to be honest with you, once I started hitting those young teenage years, like I said, New Orleans, there's a certain lifestyle you can jump into early, and we did. And so I think escaping and just avoiding, not being home, not being around, staying under the radar, that was definitely one of my coping skills back then. Yeah.
Now, coming up up in New Orleans, I'm a big blues guy, and I know they had some of the best blues clubs and the best food ever. So, did you get into the music scene?
Oh my God. It's funny you say that, man, because I've always been I'm obsessed with music. Okay. Music, I mean, it's on all the time. That's a vinyl collection behind me right there. That's my baby. Um, so yes, I've always loved music, but it's interesting because like the real New Orleans, like the jazz and the blues, it's later in life that I really appreciate it. As a teenager, we were listening to more, we were more into classic rock and Led Zeppelin, man, and all the, psychedelic rock at the time. And we weren't as appreciative as, young men as I am now of the roots and just the depth of that music, man. Now
Now,
I really appreciate it.
now, did you have a military lineage in your family?
Yeah, yeah, my dad. It's funny because it wasn't my dad didn't talk about it much. It wasn't a big part of it just wasn't a big part of his personality or whatever. But yeah, my dad was in the Air Force during the Korean conflict. And then my grandpa, who I never met actually, was in World War II in the Army. So there's a little lineage there on my dad's side. Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, it's in the, your dad's gone and, God rest his soul. But as you got older and became more wise and seen what the military can do to a man, have you
Yeah.
gone back and started seeing maybe this was one of the reasons why he drank a little bit too much? Did he struggle with any PTS?
I think so. I think so. He's not the kind of he's old school. He wasn't someone that would talk about it or admit it or get help or anything. But yeah, I think if he was being really honest and we could have gone back, I think so. Yeah, he didn't cope too well with stuff. Yeah.
So when you went to the recruiter, because I love everybody's got a different recruiting story. So you got to tell me, what was it
Oh,
like that day going into the recruiter's office?
oh,
Take us back to that moment.
oh, it's a story. Yeah. So there I was, right? Kind of a lost soul, graduated high school. And for me, again, I'll just full disclosure, it was those couple of years after high school. I joined when I was 20. Okay. So for a couple of years through high school, really, and then for a few years after, man, it was just embracing that party lifestyle. All we wanted to do was escape. And there was a lot of drugs, a lot of excess, I mean, honestly, sometimes I feel lucky to be here. I mean, even now at this age, I look back, oh man, I'm lucky to even be here. Some of the stuff we did. So I remember, so I was the last kid on the block anyone thought I was going to join the army, kid. That's my point. I wasn't that kid. My family, my friends, no one would have ever guessed that one, just based on my lifestyle, right? And my attitude. But everything fell apart. You know how it is. They say a perfect storm. I remember broke up with my girlfriend. I was all depressed. My car broke down. Couldn't afford to fix it. Missed some shifts at work. Lost my job. Moved back home with the parents. It was just, it seemed dramatic, but at the time it was a low point. It was like one of the darkest points for me. I was really directionless, didn't know what I was doing. And I remember back then I saw one of those dang commercials. Back then it was be all that you can be, get an edge
Mhm.
on life. That one. And I remember it hit me one day. I go, huh. And then my good buddy of mine, I'm still friends with him. He lives in Vegas. I remember he joined a little before me. And that was a surprise too. I'm like, wow, man. And he came home I remember after basic came home and I saw him. And I just remember going, dang, like I didn't know what squared away meant yet, but I was like, you just got some kind of swagger about you, man. He had money, he had a car, he looked all fit. And I just remember going, man, if he can, he really inspired me to go, wow, if he can do it, man, because we had grown up together. And I think just a combination of feeling lost and I wanted out, you know what I mean? I wasn't like, want to get the education money, want to get, for me, it was a very personal thing. I wanted something just to totally get out of my whole life, whole situation. Boy, little did I know what I was getting into. So, yeah. So I walked into the recruiter's office and I'm telling you, man, I had the long hair. Like I was not your typical, they probably were like, what is this kid doing in here? And I'll never forget, I took the ASVAB and I did pretty good. And he's like, all right, here's all the stuff you could pick from. Oh, what's this? Fire support specialist. Yeah, fighting fire. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. 13 Foxtrot, fire support. He goes, I go, you like fighting fires? He goes, oh, no. Fire as in, military, weapon fire. I go, oh. And he goes, let me ask you this. I swear he does what he said. He goes, you like camping? I said, yeah, man, I love it. You like being out in nature? Yeah, man. Oh, you're gonna love this. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. And sure enough, I signed up. And I remember from the day I signed up till the day I was gonna leave was 14 days. And I was in such a negative place with my parents and my family. I mean, people I'm really close to, even like my big sister, I'm really close to now. Even then, I didn't tell anybody. My friends knew, but no one in my family knew. And I'll never forget, it was like 3 days before I left. I came home like 9 o'clock in the morning after being out all night, hadn't slept yet. And I pulled up and my dad was in the garage working on something. And we made eye contact. And I said, oh, shit, here. I knew something was up. And I walked up and he was kind of shaking. I could tell he was upset. And he goes, we need to have a conversation. We need to talk about something. I go, well, I need to tell you something too. And he goes, you go first. I go, well, I joined the Army. He goes, don't you joke. He got mad. Don't you joke like that. That's not, I said, I'm not joking. And man, I get choked up because he literally, his face changed. He opened the door. He said, honey, he called everything changed. It was like, they saw me going down into a dark hole. And what he told me later, he said, I was going to basically put your ass in rehab. I was going to tell you, we're going to go get you some help. You're going down at the wrong path. I can tell. And me telling them that, I mean, they were beside themselves, So we spent the next few days bonding out. They'd get up, make me breakfast. It was like suddenly we had a connection again. And it was a game changer for me. I didn't know what I was doing, Richard. I had no idea what I was getting into, man. I thought about it a little bit, saw my buddy, asked a few questions, just went for it and just took the leap. But when I first got my first leave, once I knew some stuff, I went back to that recruiter's office. I really was just going to say, hey, come on, man. You're going to ask me if I like camping? Because really what it meant was when your buddies are out on the weekend, you're going to be out, you're going to be sleeping in the dirt. You're going to be in the field a lot, training. That's really what he was asking me.
Okay, now, did you join the regular Army or National Guard?
Yeah, I went active duty, 3-year contract. Back then they did 3-year contracts.
Now did you go EM or did you go officer side?
I was enlisted. My first, I spent the first half of my career enlisted. So I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for basic training and AIT. And AIT was almost harder than basic. It was, it was just more intense. And then they waited till, last couple weeks of basic and came around when everyone was all gung-ho. So who wants to go airborne? And so their timing was good. So a couple of us like, yeah, man. So we volunteered to go 82nd Airborne Division. So then we went to Fort Benning jump school. And then I showed up at Fort Bragg about a month before my 21st birthday. And that's really, where I grew up as a soldier. Spent 3 years active duty, Fort Bragg.
All right. So, I think you're like my 630 interview or something like that. I've talked to plenty of Navy SEALs, Delta Force, Rangers, you name it. And a lot of them, like I said, I interviewed a gentleman, my friend, his name is John McCaskill. He wrote the book, Embrace the Suck. And I said, John, I'm like, you look more like my accountant than you do somebody I would have thought was a Navy SEAL. And he's like, yeah, a lot of us look like that because a lot of people think that those people that are jacked and shredded, 6'5", blonde hair, blue eyes, they wash out like the first week. So, talk to us a little bit about making the selection process as far as getting into 82nd.
Yeah. I got to say, it wasn't, when I was in the 82nd, we thought we were pretty cool, right? Because we joke about the legs. Everyone who wasn't airborne was a leg and, all that. But, and so I like to think that this back then anyway in the 90s, the standards, the culture, it was a step above kind of like whatever, maybe some regular units, but it was not, it wasn't special forces or any of that. And, it wasn't even close to that level. So there wasn't like, like an indoctrination program or something. It was just more like I qualified on paper, I volunteered, and because I passed jump school, I was allowed to go. And, as long as I didn't wash out, and I could hang. I mean, people didn't survive that culture because they just couldn't hang. So they'd get, whatever, removed from the military or whatever. So it was pretty intense, but it wasn't like there was a certain kind of indoctrination program to get in there.
Okay, so now, like I said, I've had a lot of interviews, a lot of amazing people like yourself, and I had the author of the book Echo and Ramadi on, and so it got me to thinking. I'm sure that when you're sitting in Ramadi, especially when shit got just kicked off or started to kick off, and you're like, this is not camping, guys. We're not. It doesn't feel like we're at a campground. So what was that like being a leader of men in a conflict?
Yeah, man. So that's jumping ahead, right? So it's a trip because when I was a young buck there at Fort Bragg, because back then it was like you spent 3 months on called on call, where you couldn't even if you went to there was no cell phones back then. Even if you went to the movies off base, you had to sign out. You had to be within a certain mileage of base, because 82nd could be within anywhere on the planet within 18 hours. And this is back in the day, and then you go off cycle for a while and you take your leave and everything, and then you'd be in training cycle. And so it's funny because when I was there, ready to go, trained up, airborne, I never got deployed. I barely missed Desert Storm. And when I was there, I was ready to rock, but never got deployed. So now jump ahead. Now I went years later, I was at Fort Campbell for a while, air assault, and I ended up doing a program called Green to Gold, where you go from green to the gold bar, butter bar. And I went ROTC. So that was my way of going. And I went over to the officer side after being enlisted for about 5 years. So now you jump ahead. Here I am in the National Guard. Now I was on orders, so I was full time, but I wasn't active duty. I was on orders in the Guard, Now here I am, married, 2 young kids, starting a family, and that's when I got deployed, So got that deployment. And back then it was 18 months, man. You are hereby ordered to deploy for a period not to exceed 544 days. Whew. I'll never forget that. I was like, I started doing the math. I'm like, damn, that's an 18-month deployment. So Ramadi was a trip because I wasn't, I was not in the tip of the spear out there with these young soldiers going outside the wire every day. I was a staff officer. I was the S6 communications officer, had an amazing group of communication specialists, and we handled all commo. And this is 2005, 2006, right? So, I mean, everything from satellite phones to the internet cafe to private internet people could pay for, to tactical communications in the Humvees, to Blue Force Tracker, all this cool technology. We handled all that for a 600-member battalion. So it was an amazing opportunity. But my battalion commander was the kind of guy who said, look, I don't care if you're staff officer, what, you're going on a combat mission at least once a month. You're going to go out. And so at the time we're like, whoo, but looking back, I really respect that. He didn't want staff officers to just think they're just going to sit. We were in Ramadi. I mean, at the time that was a very, you've read the books and, even the movies, Chris Kyle, I never got to meet him, but that's when we were there. A lot of my buddies got to meet the SEALs and hang out with them and go on some ops with them. It was a pretty intense time. And so to answer your question, I'll talk about one of the combat missions I did go on, right? I went on a handful. But again, my main job was, we had a few missions, my unit called the Triple Deuce. We had a recovery mission, which meant the maintenance guys, right? Someone got blown up, Humvee got blown up. They'd go out and recover vehicles and people. We also had the counterfire mission because we were artillery. So anyone shoots at that base in Ramadi in 05, 06, our radar picked it up, and with about 30 seconds, right, that was us shooting back, protecting the whole base. And then we also did base security. We just got tagged for that. So my battalion had people in all the guard posts securing the base and working with, you know, a lot of units. And so to answer your question, it was intense, man. I mean, I'd been through the training, right? I felt prepared, but I mean, you know, I can only imagine, and I talk about this in the book, the really, you know, really intense combat situations, which is trippy because the more advanced we get as a military, the less of us are going to be in that situation, the tip of the spear, right? Most of us are in a support role. People don't realize that, you know, they think, oh, if you're a veteran, you've been in a firefight. And I'm like, no, nah, most people haven't actually. It's a small percentage. And so there was a mission we had, and what it was there was some intel, right, that there was a Taliban training facility right there in Ramadi, and right next to one, they had found a weapons cache, a bunch of weapons that they were using to shoot at us, every, you know, mortars and rockets all the time, right near this farm. So that was the mission. We were going to go, and we never got in helicopters during the daylight because it was just too dangerous. But this day we did, and that was intense, man. So that was one of my coolest. Cool was the wrong word, but just the having to just step into that training and step into that moment. That one really stands out to me. So we had 3 helicopters, and I was, you know, the leader of one of those teams, and it was 9 people on my team. So my soldiers, right, a machine gunner. We had some Marines with us. We had a K9 on the helicopter with us, EOD guy with his K9, and the mission was to fly out in the middle of the day and land on this chicken farm, and because there was a Taliban training place half a mile up the road. And so it was really intense, right? Just very visceral, you know, last one in the bird, you know, you're the first one out. So it was almost surreal. You're in there and everyone's literally, you know, lock and load. It sounds funny, but you're literally like, all right, this is real shit. Everyone's getting ready. I'm looking over at this K9. If the thing lands, I'm the first one out. We had a plan, right? We'd done rehearsals, set a perimeter. And I mean, that dust kicks up. I mean, for a few minutes, you can't see anything. And we had my interpreter with me, right? I come up, dust clears, and there's a house, the owner of the farm. And it's just something like you see out of a movie, right? You see that little structure, and a man comes into the doorway. You just see a figure of a male, right? With the, you know, the long flowing garments on, and the plan, you just have to go through with the plan. So we just start literally sprinting toward this man. Sprinting. I'm off safe, right? You know what I'm saying? I like to say a joke and say your whole worldview changed when you click from safe to ready, you know? So I was off safe, running, and the interpreters running at him. I'm like, you know, put your hands in the air, whatever, move away from the door. And he was hesitating, being weird, you know, all the stories, all the intel, you don't know what's about to happen. So we got up to him. Luckily, we cleared him, nothing. So my guys kept going. They ran in, cleared the building, had a few other buildings. And it all ended up being fairly underwhelming, right? We didn't find anything. So the mission was to go and either make sure there weren't weapons or discover the cache that was there. But you didn't know that, right? So it was all pretty intense. And I'll never forget, there was a little road. There was a big road nearby, and there was a little dirt road coming to our location. And, right, that was the mission. I put the machine gunner directly on that road, on the ground, because as we got there and we're dealing with this guy, we look, and a truck full of, right, military-age males, pickup truck, back of the pickup just filled with, and there, I mean, you know, they were giving us the stank eye, you know what I mean? They were like, what the? So it was kind of shady. We thought we were going to make contact. It seemed very, very likely. We were on full alert, and but it ended up being a thing where, you know, you check the whole place, you clear it, took us a couple hours, and, you know, you're waiting for the ride to come back in, and you're, you know, giving candy to the kids, and it became a little bit of that kind of moment. But so the first half of it and the ramp up and the leading into it, that's about as close as I can imagine, you know, leading into.
You know what, you know, let me ask you a question, because I did a total of 23 years. 20 of it was in the Guard. And there's a difference between being deployed on active duty with active duty soldiers and being deployed with a National Guard unit. Because pretty much the National Guard Army unit, it's a family. It's a brotherhood. You know Aunt Sally, you know Aunt Joe. Like we lost one of our guys. His name is Sergeant Bullard. And I would see his family at the grocery store. I would see his family at the gas station. So when you lose somebody in a National Guard unit, I mean, it's as bad on active duty, but you probably won't see that family ever after deployment. But after you deploy with a National Guard unit, like it's something that's, I can't explain it. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because most people don't realize, they say, National Guard 2 weeks out of the year, 1 weekend a month, whatever. That's bullshit. And they get deployed twice or three times as much as an active Army duty a soldier would. So please talk a little bit about a guard being in the Guard also.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, man. And I don't know if this is don't quote me on this statistic, but I think it's 70% of our combat power is in the Guard and Reserves. So yeah, that whole thing, I think that whole mythology got blown with these last couple of wars. I mean, you can't really even fight a war without the Guard and Reserve force, but you're right. I mean, I never deployed at, when I was in, on active duty, but, of course I deployed with a bunch of active duty folks, and you're right. I think there's something different. This was a trip because, I mean, not only, so we had our battalion, which was, and I got pulled to go with this battalion. So I didn't necessarily know everyone in this battalion. I was a little bit of a transplant. I knew one or two people when I first showed up, but you spend 6 months in pre-combat training in Mississippi, you get pretty close, and you can see there. I mean, we literally had 2 or 3 father-sons in the unit. Like, you're right, it was a family. I mean, we had literally family members together in the unit, but we got, we got some people from a few different states, even in our battalion. We had some people from Pennsylvania. Then we all got rolled up in the 28th Infantry Division. And so our brigade combat team that went into Iraq was like 27 different states represented. So it was all that National Guard flavor brought together into a huge brigade combat team. Then, oh, by the way, they linked us up with like 3,000 Iraqi Army soldiers. So it was very diverse group. And I think you're right, though. Just on the day-to-day, just the connection between people. And we had some losses as well. And of course, it's always going to hit hard. But I mean, yeah, these were people that knew they were going to, like you said, go home and see this, individual's family at the grocery and literally hometown stuff. So I think you're right.
Yeah, I just wanted your professional opinion on that. Now, How many years did you do total?
So I was in about 11 years. I'm one of those statistics, unfortunately, that it's almost like I just crossed the 10-year mark. I almost feel like my career was just taking off. I just got a company command, got promoted to captain. I was like, all right, now it was almost like I had my first career. I actually had a break in service, and I was like, I went back in, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to go be an officer. It was like my second, career, and I was just ready to go for it. And, I'm in no way do I blame the military, because I volunteered for all this, right? But I'm one of those statistics that deployment took a huge toll on my family. I won't blame the deployment for the divorce, but I came back, right? It just changed everything. When I left, my mom was still around. I was married, happily married, I thought. I had 2 young kids. By the time I got back, mom had passed. That's another story. I lost mom halfway through the deployment to breast cancer, but that was right around the time Katrina hit New Orleans, by the way. So it was a crazy year for me, but came back and, got divorced. I knew I was getting divorced before I even came back. So I came back with a plan, boom, divorce. And within about a month, I was a single dad with full custody. And
all right. So, well, because I want to dig deep into that.
Okay.
Before we do that, I want to thank our sponsor. As you guys know, I was with GNC for over 30 years, and I was in the military for 23 years. So I loved pre-workouts. I loved coffee, but most coffees tasted like ass. They didn't give me the energy I needed. So we created our own coffee called Vertical Momentum Coffee. And it's twice the energy, no crash. It's all veteran hand roasted. But the best thing is I'm working with a company called Project Die Hard. And we're actually, every penny of the coffee, the profits go to help end veteran homelessness and veteran suicide. So what we're actually doing, we're actually building a it's like a fob. We're actually building a fob where 12 single soldiers and 4 soldiers with families can come for a whole year. We're going to take care of them physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, no cost to the soldier for a whole year, including their family and how many kids they have. And we're going to do that for a whole year. So that's what we're doing to help end homelessness and to end veteran suicide. So if you guys love coffee, if you love coffee with a mission, write coffee down below and I'll get that information to you. So let me ask you a question because, like I said, we had a lot of interviews and I found that once we step off the base, military does not give a shit about you. Your phone stops ringing. You don't have the camaraderie. You don't have a paycheck and you don't have a mission. And a lot of us, we find ourselves alone with a bottle of whiskey and a weapon next to our hands. So please talk to us a little bit about it, if you don't mind, about what your transitioning was like when you got out of the military.
Yeah, man. My heart goes out to folks with that because it's tough. I'll tell you about my transition, but I'll just start with this. In my day job, in my civilian career, I've got to work with thousands of veterans. I'm talking from E1, E2, just got out, did a couple years, got out, to 3-star admirals, and they all share that. I've had, flag officers say the same thing almost you just said. Man, I get out, everything's unknown, so it's not just us young soldiers. It's a common theme across the spectrum. So for me personally, yeah, I got back and I had a little bit of a transition. Like I said before, I was a statistic, right? I didn't plan on being a single parent. I didn't plan on having full custody, and I didn't plan on my kids being so traumatized while I was gone. So I knew in my heart, I got to throw in the towel. I would not risk leaving them again. That was the deal. There was no family support plan, right? There was nobody. I just didn't have anyone else to step forward. I was it. And the look in their eyes, I was like, nope, I'm not going anywhere. I got you, So I knew in my heart I was going to make that decision and end my career and move into a different chapter in life where I could be there with them, right? Be the soccer dad, do the whole, full parenting mode. But I got home and they gave me an opportunity to go on orders, be full-time in the Utah National Guard, got promoted to captain. I was a first lieutenant in Iraq, and gave me a company command, which is kind of a rare because it's a very artillery-based state, and I was a signal officer. But I was just very fortunate to be chosen for that. And so a lot of the people in my company I just deployed with. So it was actually the perfect transition job. So from a work perspective, I got to stay in for a couple more years after and transition like that. And that was my last position I held. But on a personal level, yeah, man, that was one of the most difficult times. I mean, I'm still unpacking all that. You know what I mean? I came home and I read about this in the book because I'm not someone who, I came home without a scratch. You know what I mean? I don't know how that happened, but it just is what it is. I was in Ramadi. The place where I lived was called Mortar Alley. I mean, there were just a lot of mortars and rockets and indirect fire. I did go out on some missions, and there were just a lot of death and destruction around. But somehow I'm one of the ones who came home without a scratch. But the emotional war, man, that's really the heart of why I wrote this book. call it an emotional war. Those inner wars we all fight. It was intense, man. Like I said, it just, what are the odds in that 12-month period I was deployed that all this shit would happen at the same time? So Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, right? And I was a signal officer. I had all the toys. I had the sat phone. Even with all the cool technology, I couldn't get in touch with anyone in my family for like 3 weeks. And that was just maddening. I mean, I didn't know what I'm watching CNN like everyone else. Like, I just didn't know, man. So, and oh, by the way, my mom was already done with chemo, relapsed in radiation therapy for breast cancer at that time. So you can imagine she was not doing well. This isn't someone you want to evacuate and drive, But so, right. So imagine trying to focus on the mission. You got to stay focused, man. In that environment, you got to stay focused. But it was very challenging to do that with all the turmoil going inside. So you got the Katrina thing, the destruction at home, not knowing about mom. Then I found them and find out mom's even closer, right? Where mom's going downhill. It's not good. Meanwhile, my wife and kids are across the country in Utah, and I don't want to get into too many details with that, right? We're cool now. We're civil, but I'll just say that, right, if there's a list of all the shit you don't do when your spouse is deployed, there's just things that are just, right. She checked them all and then added some new creative ones to the list. I'll just put it that way. So it came to my awareness that everything was falling apart with my marriage, my best friend. The kids were not in a safe, and we went from being all about the kid. I just didn't know what was going on, man. So can you imagine, right? I'm 8,000 miles from home. On one part of me wants to be there with my family in New Orleans and make sure everyone's all right there, be with mom. The other part feels so much guilt that I'm not home with my kids when I can't prove it, but I know things are not going well. It's not good. So I finally got home, luckily made it home alive, and I get there. And once I got home, really, really is when the truth started to reveal itself, right? I didn't know the half of it. But then it started.
I want to talk, because obviously there's so many veteran shows out there. There's hundreds of thousands of veteran shows. But one show, I think our show is one of the only ones where we will talk about something called moral injury. And the reason why, we have people like yourself, call people that call for fire. We have people that I've had a lot of helicopter pilots, a lot of Air Force pilots that, unfortunately, some of them, unfortunately took out of school or have, collateral damage, and they have to go home and think about that stuff. And a lot of people don't really think about them because they're thinking, oh, well, they're just in a talk somewhere. But there is such thing as a moral injury. And it also is a survivor's guilt that people deal with that we really don't talk about that much. So, in your time, what have you learned and how do you feel about dealing with survivor's guilt and also moral injury?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's another layer, right? So that picture I painted, you asked about my transition. I'll just say it was not as bad as some have heard, but for me, it was very internal, right? It was a deep, dark place. I went inside, and I had to sort of reach for the light, if you would, because I could feel it. It was not going well. So that's another layer for me. What you just brought up is like, right, it's kind of indirect for me, which is interesting because it's literally called indirect fire, right? So I told you we had the counterfire mission, indirect fire, right? They shoot at us, and they're not that accurate. They're just lobbing mortars at us. But it was a trip because we used to joke and say, Camo, you can talk about us, but you can't talk without us, right? So you couldn't shoot back without the communications technology. So we took a lot of pride in the fact that every mission on the battlefield without communications at that, that level of warfare, you couldn't, we relied on it very heavily. So it was kind of like indirect, but I did feel weird about that when I got home. It was like, right, we'd hear the mortars coming in. You knew you could hear it incoming or outgoing. You knew it was incoming. Everyone took cover. And then we'd all be sitting there, we'd wait, and we were really, the triple deuce was really good at their job. They had those paladins, and within 30 seconds, you know, and we were cheering, man. You know, I mean, you feel like they're trying to kill you. And so you're cheering, hoping that it takes him out. I mean, looking back, it sounds, you know, crazy, but I mean, we do battle damage assessments, you know, and we'd see the video, we'd see the footage of what they found at the site. And, you know, and it's just a strange feeling to get home and not be in that environment. And all of a sudden, you know, your whole life is about getting the kids dressed and feed them and bring them to daycare, but all that stuff lingers. So I feel, again, very lucky. Some people, man, you know, they really, 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 I mean, deal with that. They get their whole Humvee gets taken out. They're the only one who survives. I can only imagine the psychological sort of torture of that. For me, it was just like kind of you said, just that moral injury piece, just being part of that and knowing that we played a key role in, I mean, our battalion, our brigade definitely, you know, killed a lot of bad guys.
All right, so now let's talk, because for me, I got hurt on duty and they medically discharged me. So not only did I lose my sight, I also lost my career. And I did everything I could to be Sergeant Kaufman. And then for them to say you are no longer Sergeant Kaufman, it was my identity. It was everything who I was. I didn't know who Richard was. And so that was, you know, people that watch my show, they know I attempted suicide Memorial Day 2012. Thank God it didn't work out. But I also, people that I do talk to, 90% of them, their identity is what they did in the military or what their rank was. And when they get out, you know, you're Private Joe Snuffy. You know, who are you now? You know, you spent 11 years in the military. Well, you know, who's Lee? So how did you find out? How did you start to reimagine your life again?
Big time, man. Whew, that's a great question. Absolutely. I mean, it had become my identity, right? Like I said, I was in the Guard, but I was on orders, so that was my job all day, every day. I was in uniform, and then especially after the deployment, right? That's like the pinnacle of my career. Then I came back. I was a company commander. Anything anyone needed, 24/7, right? It was very much my identity. And so when I finally stepped out of that uniform, it was a trip. It was very sort of unsettling, you know. You feel like you can't touch the bottom a little bit. You're just floating out there. And for me personally, it's complicated because it was that, but again, is the kids were my inspiration. Looking at them and knowing what they had just gone through, I mean, I was like a bulldog, man. For the first year I got home, I'll tell you right now, literally for 12 months, every night, you know, some parents like put the kids down, don't sleep in the bed. For 12 months, every night, this is how I slept. One kid right here and one right here. There was no one that was gonna, like, that was my new mission, to protect those kids. And I felt, right, all the stuff that happened with my family, my ex-wife and all that, I felt a lot of darkness, bitterness, anger, resentment starting to really, really more than ever before. You know, that really wasn't my default, but it was really growing, man. And so for me, as corny as it sounds, man, I don't remember the day, the moment, but I remember the time frame. And I just made this internal shift and was like, I'm gonna go all in and just, you said the word, reinvent. I'm getting out of the military. I'm gonna reinvent myself professionally. I'm a single parent now. Like, everything was new, right? Mom, I was real close to my mom, so not having her on the planet, like, it was just, everything was so new. And I just started doing some soul searching, man. And you know, obviously I get into that in the book. For me, it was just reading, journaling, starting. And I had never, ever, that's another change. I was just someone, before I went to Ramadi, before I went to deploy, never been to counseling, therapy. I was a cliche. I was like, oh, I'm not going to talk to someone about my feelings. You know, I was definitely that guy. I got back and they give you free, you know, like, I think it was like a dozen free counseling sessions. And I was like, man, all right. I finally started asking for help. I finally started, right? I compartmentalized everything, man. I like to say I've stuck it on a Foot Locker with a big old lot. I finally opened the Foot Locker and just slowly started asking for help, man. And it's a journey that's still ongoing today. It's just a journey of sort of self-discovery and inner,
All right,
inner
so
growth.
let me ask you, because for me, when my life changed Memorial Day 2012, that was after everything happened, and I decided I need help, but there's other people out there like me that are struggling, and that's why the show is what it is. But I realized, I just did a post today that because I do my cardio every morning and I do my listening. I listen to audible books. I got 15 books going right now, and at the top of the list is "Look to the Warriors: 12 Perspectives to Cultivating Inner Peace." That's the top of my list. But I also realized that in order to be successful, we have to change our habits and we have to change our thought process. So I went back all the way, everybody talks about Napoleon Hill. Well, I went back to his teacher, Mr. Carnegie. And one of his favorite sayings was, your obsessions become your possessions. So a lot of people, I think, when we get out of the military, we kind of have that old school mentality where now we have to change our mentality as a civilian. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I did the same thing. I mean, I love the whole, we can call it self-help, personal development. It's like a genre. I think it's like an art form, man. I love it. I mean, there's so many books and writers out there, some veterans, and I mean, it's not fiction. It's not nonfiction. It's books that are deliberately written to inspire, to educate, to lift you up. Like that's the goal of them. And I think they're pretty powerful. So I've just read countless books and went that way too. And again, I kind of started off when you asked me definition of resiliency. To me, it's an inside game. I'm not going to say the world can't jack you up and throw you curveballs, but right, there's so many examples out there and books and teachings and things. You could even get into spirituality. I won't go there, but I mean, ancient, spiritual teachings and really at the core of it, right? Where we have the most power, freedom is inside, right? You can't control the world, but most people, most of the time, obviously there's exceptions to everything, extreme cases, you do have control over how you respond to the world, how you respond to the world. So you can't control what's happening, but you control the way you react to that and whether you learn from it, right? Is it a growth mindset? Is it a fixed mindset? There's so many ways to look at it. And so for me, it was kind of like what you said. I realized it hit me. There's some books that really, I mean, I love a lot of books, but there's a couple books that just blew my mind and really shifted my perspective. And it got me listening and noticing for the first time. Here I was 35 and I'm noticing that voice in my head. And I realized, bruh, this voice in my head is crueler to me than any person out there could ever be. More degrading. It was like a bully that lived. It was like sharing an apartment with someone who was constantly. And so one of my favorite quotes, I don't remember who said it, but it's the words we speak become the house we live in.
Oh, I like that.
You know what I mean? And so not just the words we speak out here.
Yeah.
I'm talking here. And, one of my favorite writers said, we talk about affirmations and usually means positive affirmations, but every thought is an affirmation.
Yeah. I mean, even like I'm a Christian, I'm a born again Christian. I believe in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. But even in the Bible, it says capture every thought. It says it for a reason. But, like some of my mentors are Mr. Tony Robbins, Mr. Ed Milet, and they talk, and there's something you don't hear about on a lot of shows either. They talk about the reticular activating system in the mind. That whatever your mind searches for, it's going to find, whether that's positive or that's negative. Like for me, I went on starting January 1st. I went on a news diet. I haven't watched the news since January 1st, and it's changed my life because I'm not all the negative stuff. I'm not hearing. I'm only listening to my positive stuff or reading my books or talking to positive people. So I think that's something that we need to do, including getting this book, because this book helped me change my perspective on being a parent. So talk to us about this book that you wrote, because for me, I'm on my third iteration.
Wow.
I've outlined it, I've marked it all. But like for me, when I wrote my book, it hit #1 twice on Amazon. It was very cathartic, but I had to rip open a lot of old scabs when I was writing my book. So talk to us about writing, coming out with your book, Look to the Warriors, 12 Perspectives to Cultivate Inner Peace. What was that like writing your book, and what was the thought process in writing the book?
Yeah, man. So you hit it right on the nose again. Cathartic. That's the first level. There's like so many layers and levels and reasons for this book. So the first one is what you said, right? It was very cathartic for me. It's almost like I've had time now it sounds crazy because I've been out for 16 years now, but with some wisdom and time and perspective, I can see so much more clearly what I couldn't see back then. And so it's almost like this was my love letter or my thank you to the military culture for what it gave me that I didn't appreciate. Man, when I was 21 years old at Fort Bragg, you think we were appreciative? No, we were complaining. You know how it is, man. We were like, oh man, I got to jump on Friday night. Looking back though, the older I get, the more I realize what a gift the military has been to me, and what a turning point it was for my life, and how much it's impacted my life on so many levels. Right? We call it transferable skills. The skills and the versatility you learn, you can apply it to anything, including your inner life. So that's one level. It just was something I always want to do. I'm a huge fan of personal development books, and I've seen a lot. I just love them, and I've seen a lot of books even by other veterans, and they're amazing. I've got them some on my bookshelf, and I noticed, especially ones by veterans, usually, not always, but I'm going to say usually, they tend to be about like leadership, business, which makes perfect sense, right? How to apply these. I want to do something different. I want to do something that's just super, super relatable to non-veterans, right? Because that's what I find. I know a lot of people, they appreciate veterans, they admire it, but they don't get it. They can't really relate. They want to, like, oh man, thank you, but they don't relate. So I want to take something and really just go into like everyday experience of what I call like your everyday soldier or military member, right? So my book's not really about combat and super intense stuff. It's about the inner world, the psychology of what it's like to move through the military. And so that was another reason I did it, right? Is just to create a doorway, if you will, right? There's 12 perspectives, right? I didn't call them rules or, they're perspectives. It's just to shift people's minds and hopefully give people a new way to consider their amazing veterans. I'm just such a fan, and I get to work with veterans today. I'm like, man, I just feel like the 2% of our population, us veterans, have so much to teach the rest. And I don't want to be, exaggerate, but generally speaking, talking about news and stuff, it just seems like, everyone knows the negative stuff about being in the military. Everyone, right? Ask anyone, oh yeah, there's this, there's that, but you don't hear as much about the positive stuff. You don't hear as much about like the post-traumatic growth and the people like you who are out here just literally doing these amazing things. And I'm sure you agree that if you take away all your military experience and training, you probably wouldn't be the person you are. It really, it just creates a depth and a level of humanity and compassion. And so it's almost like repurposing the military experience in new ways for people who haven't ever served. That's kind of another reason I did it. And then, not to sound all, I don't want to sound too grandiose with this, but yeah, man, there's an epidemic of mental health and suicide in this country. There's no way around it. It's not just veterans. I mean, good God, man, God bless the veterans. It's been how long has this been? I mean, everyone's been talking about the 22 a day, and it's been a long time.
Okay, so let me talk a little bit, because I mean, one thing I love your book. It talks about perspective. And for me, like what I took away from the book is everything in life is perspective. Like for me, I forget, like 2 weeks ago when I first got your book, I started reading it. I'm like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then I go to take out the garbage. It's raining and I'm cold and I'm taking out the garbage. I'm like, man, this really sucks. And then I sat and I'm sitting in the rain and I'm going, perspective. 20 years ago, 3 miles from where I was living, I was homeless, living in a car. Now I get to take out the garbage in my home.
Yeah.
So it's changed my perspective. This book changed my perspective on perspectives, because once we change I have to's to I get to, your whole life can change just by your perspective. And that's the biggest thing I got out of this book is everything is perspective. Like my dad came over from Italy. He always used to joke that, the man with no shoes can't complain to the man with no feet. So It's all about perspective in life. Like, and if you've never been overseas, here our Facebook went down for the day, but overseas there's children drinking out of moats. And, so perspective is a really big motivator in life. So talk to us a little bit about having a perspective in life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably the heart of the whole book. That's why that word's in the title. It's just shifting perspectives. That's kind of the theme of it. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's been times, look, I'm just a human being like everyone else. I have my struggles, but there's been people in my life that are very close to me, and difficult things would happen in life, and they kind of joke a little bit and go, "Man, don't you ever?" This years after I got out of the military, don't you ever get stressed, man? Don't And so the short answer was, of course, yeah. You might not realize that it's going on inside. I might process it in a certain way because I've been through stuff, but absolutely, of course, I was in there. They kind of pushed me, yeah, but this happened and you didn't. I said, and so perspective, I say, look, unless you can recreate the first week of like January 2006, it's going to be pretty tough to rattle me. You might, but I don't know. I wouldn't take that bet, because compared to that first week of January 2006, man, I feel like I have a lifetime pass to gratitude. Like, good Lord. I mean, I told you the situation, right? At January 2006, Mom had passed, so I knew I was going to go home for the funeral. Found out some devastating news about my wife at the time, all in the same week. Suicide bomber took out injured a few of our personnel, but that was our first loss. So I'm sitting in a memorial service in Ramadi, Iraq for him, and they're showing pictures of his kids, right? It was heartbreaking, knowing I'm getting on a helicopter that night to go home because my mom. So not to mention the mortars, just all of it put together, man, that's a rough week. So all I have to do is just go back to that time and go, whoo, it's not January 2006 though. So I do agree. Perspective is everything. There's a million examples of it. There's an old quote: when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
I love it. Now, for me, I'm a big gratitude guy. I love gratitude. I've had a guy his name is Mr. David Meltzer. He wrote the movie Jerry Maguire about him. And he said, gratitude is the things that make men great. And for me, like I said, before I go to bed at night, whether my wife knows about it or not, I pray for her every night. I touch her and I pray for her. And then before I go to bed, I say 3 things that I'm grateful for that day. Yeah. And then when I wake up in the morning, if my eyes open and I can see something after going blind, if I can see something now, I have an attitude of gratitude, and I just say, Lord, thank you for today. It's going to be an amazing day. As long as I'm waking up and you give me the opportunity to live another day, I'm grateful. So talk to us a little bit about having an attitude of gratitude, but also something else you mentioned, and I noticed it last night. My she's 11 now, And my wife says, there's going to be a day where she doesn't want you to tuck her in anymore. There's going to be a last day. And I think a lot of us as parents, we're like, oh, come on, really, I got to come in and tuck you in bed. You're 11 years old. But there's going to be a day where she doesn't want me to tuck her in bed anymore. So please talk about having gratitude, but also, realizing for everything in life, there's going to be one last time.
Yeah, man, that's so powerful. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I look at gratitude as almost like an investment. You can invest in that bank and it just keeps building to where almost like gratitude, right? When I was younger, I used to walk around with this shield of self-doubt and I didn't respect myself and I just try to mask. Right now I walk around with this shield of gratitude. Like, man, I don't know what it would take for me to run out and drain the gratitude account that I've built up, but it would be, oh my God, it would take a lot because I'm like you. I have my rituals. I'm a daily meditator, and every day, the end of that meditation involves prayer and thanks and gratitude. I mean, deep, man. Where I mean, I've been in tears. Just I'm so damn grateful for the blessings, and so I see gratitude as very, very, very powerful. And there's so many ways to cultivate that and to focus on that. And like you said, I mean, e- not just like, well, there's people who literally would kill for a bowl of rice right now. Not even just that level, just the comfort of just suburbia, man. Like, we take so much for granted, but you're right. Just your senses, your sight, like there's so much to be grateful for. It's ridiculous. It's unending. Um, and so I feel that very, very deeply. That's a huge part of my life too. We have that in common. Again, I see it as like an investment. It grows. I don't have to each day go, oh, I ran out. I just keep adding to it. And it feels like this source of power and strength. And it gratitude to me leads to kindness and compassion and all kind of good stuff that you want to spread around. And you're right about the parenting thing. My kids are now 20 and 22, and I've worked really hard. I think, right, we got a good foundation for a lifelong friendship. Thank God, but I definitely remember that time, and all of a sudden they're too cool, you don't need to tuck me in. And to them, it was like, yeah, all right, I'm growing up. But to me, it was kind of, it's a heartbreak when, suddenly when you used to go, you had a little ritual, you go pick them up and go get ice cream, and they want to go to the friend's house, and you just realize, oh, wow. But hey, it means, it's just part of the process. But it's, as a single dad, that part was tough for me too, man. Like I said, I came home and I was like the hero. I literally rescued them from some real not good, not good. And
So
so,
now, since this is a teaching podcast, and I always try to end with something somebody can learn from. If you're a guy or a girl, because a lot of people don't realize that they're female veterans, and
oh yeah,
'cause I have so many female veterans that I've had on the show because I showcase them because they don't get talked about a lot. They're only
yeah,
know a lot of, oh, so you're a military spouse? No, I'm a
right,
veteran. I'm a combat veteran. So,
yeah.
but so if there's a veteran out there, either they're about to get out or just got out, what are your top 3 pieces of advice for them to help in their transition to to civilian life?
Yep. Um, so number one is just hear this. This is the truth. Okay. No matter what your job was, no matter how much you feel like a fish out of water. Okay. I've actually been a career coach and an executive coach and work with veterans for about 15 years now. And I promise you, if you spent a couple years in the military, even if it doesn't feel like it, you have incredible, versatile skills that are uncommon among many people. You're going to go into teams, you don't even realize it, and you have an ability to look at a problem and a mentality to get things done that was sort of imparted to you in the military that can really, really, really help you in so many aspects of life. So that's the first thing is if you find yourself thinking, oh man, all I know is, this, or I was infantry, you have a lot more skills and talent and transferable skills, and resilience than you probably realize. So give yourself time to explore that a bit. Um, Number two is, I know it's a big buzzword these days, self-care, all that, but take care of yourself. There's that old thing. I think it might even have been Napoleon Hill. I don't know, but no, it wasn't Napoleon Hill. But it's the old thing. If you're in a plane and right, the oxygen mask come down, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first. That's what every time you go on a flight, they tell you put it on yourself, because if you can't take care of yourself, how are you going to take care of the other people that need you? So I can't stress enough. It's not saying that you're weak. It's not saying that, you failed in some way. It's the opposite. To be able to step forward, say, hey, I need a little help. A program like the one you're offering, man, that's really, really amazing. So that's number two, is really, really give yourself the learning mindset and the inner growth and development that you deserve. You worked hard and you deserve to, live a fulfilling life. And then the third thing would just be kind of related to that, I guess, which is try to find something that you enjoy. People get out and then they get to a job and they're just very overwhelmed. They're like, oh man, I'm punching a clock, I'm doing this. Do your best to try to find something you enjoy. Keep those connections, find some of your buddies who have maybe they work at a cool company, and get on with them or something. So you have some positive outlets and connections, and, so that it's not like you have your life and you have work, and work sucks, but after work is kind of okay. Try to figure out a way. Again, it's an inside game, to where even if the job isn't the ultimate job you want, you're able to look at it as a service opportunity, as a learning opportunity, and you can grow. It's that other quote, right? Grow through what you go through.
I love it. So tell me, where we can buy the book, and how do we find you, and how do we support your mission?
Yeah, thank you so much. So book's on Amazon. You can just look it up by my name. I can send you the link. You can also go to Tactical 16 Publishing and get it directly from my publisher. They're an awesome organization. And, it's interesting because really what I do is I have my sort of day job, which has nothing to do with this book, right? As by day, I'm a career advisor, an executive coach. I train people on how to write resumes and do career stuff. But by night, right, I'm an author, and so that's where this book came from. We talked about why I wrote the book. This is my unique contribution to the personal development, self-help type world from the veteran experience, but I think in a creative way that maybe hasn't been done before. And so, right, really, I'm just here to just promote the book and ask people to read it. All my information, my social media stuff's in there. You can follow it. There's lots of ways to connect with me in the back of the book. And I am going to be launching, right, related to the book. There's these 12 topics, going out to companies or organizations and doing speaking or doing training, doing workshops, right? If you read the book and you realize, wow, I've got a team or a staff or a company, I'd like to have you come in, right, and talk about, or maybe you're an organization that hires a lot of veterans, or you realize people don't understand veterans. Read the book, and if you resonate with it and you love it, I can come out and talk to you about that, or we can do it virtual. And hey, here's what people can learn from veterans about patience. Here's what people can learn from veterans about mindfulness. Some of these things are very unexpected. That was the fun part, right, in the book too, is people would never think veterans, mindfulness, but it's foundational to the whole culture. No one says it that way, right? Situational awareness, it would be a word they might use, but being present in the moments of your life and being present in a mission, it all goes together for me. So yeah.
Is there a website? Is there a website we can go to?
Yeah. So the book's on Amazon or Tactical 16. My website is leekelley4.com, and there's lots of information there, and you can, I hope we can connect.
I love it, guys. So make sure you pick up the book. Like I said, I'm on my third iteration, and I've got my book. It's all beat up. It's all marked up, scratched up, colored. because anything, even if I'm watching a cartoon, I try to pick something out of it to learn with. So every book that I pick up is for me to actually learn what's in the book, but also put it to use, practical use. And this book is amazing in changing your perspective. So definitely pick out his book. Guys, if you guys love coffee, make sure you pick up Vertical Momentum Coffee. Now, you guys know that I'm a big Joel Osteen guy. And for me, my favorite quote is, it's up to you to decide, like my t-shirt says, today I decide. Today I decide to either be a victor or the victim. Today I want you guys to make that decision to be the victor today and not carry that victim card anymore. Because really, guys, there's nobody coming to save you. It's all an inside job. So please make that decision. If you love what we're doing here, check out the podcast, but also every Thursday, I put out a newsletter called Thursday Thunder with all of our episodes. I put it out so you're able to get that in your inbox every week if you love that. So, guys, like I said, vertical momentum, the only way to go is but up. And Lee, I'm just so grateful that we finally got a chance to hang out. And I'm so grateful for your friendship.
Thank you, man. Right back at you. Really, really appreciate you.
So, guys, make sure you pick up the book. Look to the Warriors 12 Perspectives on Cultivating Inner Peace. Make sure you pick it up today. All right, guys, have an amazing day. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I love you guys. Lee, have an amazing day, brother.
Thank you so much, my friend. Bye-bye.